Today I'm going to read a wonderful, beautiful poem in the book of Isaiah, chapter 40, verses 21 to 31, reading from the Contemporary English Version. Don't you know? Haven't you heard? Isn't it clear that God created the world? God is the one who rules the whole earth, and we that live here are mere insects. He spreads out the heavens like a curtain or an open tent. God brings down rulers and turns them into nothing. They are like flowers, freshly sprung up and starting to grow, but when God blows on them, they wilt and are carried off like straw in a storm. The holy God asks, "Who compares with me? Is anyone my equal? Look at the evening sky. Who created the stars? Who gave them each a name? Who leads them like an army? The Lord is so powerful that none of the stars are ever missing. You people of Israel say, God pays no attention to us. He doesn't care if we are treated unjustly. But how can you say that? Don't you know? Haven't you heard? The Lord is the eternal God, creator of the earth. He never gets weary or tired. His wisdom cannot be measured. The Lord gives strength to those who are weary. Even young people get tired, then stumble and fall, but those who trust the Lord will find new strength. They will be strong like eagles, soaring upward on wings. They will walk and run without getting tired. May our spirits be blessed by these words from our ancient scriptures. Last week, I told you about my uncle's gravestone and the strange epitaph, "What for?" I said I wished that I could have a conversation with him, a real conversation about what motivated him. For all I know, my aunt chose those words, but I have a feeling that neither one of them would be interested in the deep questions that I would like to put to them. What was the focus of their lives other than their business and the gathering of material goods and their presence in their small community? Did they wonder about our part in the universe, the bigger picture? Did they meditate ever on the meaning of life? Did they question the deeper purpose of the universe or humanity's part in the machinations of stars and planets? Our passage from Isaiah 40 mentions humans as mere insects. The writer of these words was feeling just how small we are in comparison to the starry sky. Without any idea of what the universe would look like to us through the Hubble telescope or the James Webb telescope, each of which can look further into the far reaches of space than was ever imagined 2,500 years ago, when this was probably written. Even 100 years ago, scientists thought the Milky Way was the entire universe. The universe was infinitely old and did not change in their minds. Now, we know otherwise. The larger and better our telescopes, the more we understand that starry sky. If we humans were mere insects by comparison 2,500 years ago, how small must we feel today? When my uncle was just a little fellow, Edwin Hubble was able to see into space 140 million light years distance. Unimaginably far away. Now we can see quasars 47 billion light years away. We used to believe that the universe was unchanging, and now we believe it's getting bigger all the time. How fast does it expand? In 2001, Wendy Friedman's astronomy team measured the Hubble constant, the speed of expansion, at 72 kilometers per second per megaparsec. 1 parsec is about 3.3 light years, and a megaparsec is 1,000,000 parsecs. That number is vast, but it's still not a solid thing. Despite being called a constant, astronomers are still measuring, still looking deep into space, and still doing their math. How often have we been told that the universe is 13.7 billion years old? They tell us it takes 13.7 billion years for light from the most distant observable stars to reach our telescopes. I can't imagine how long a time that is. It's more than 207 million times longer than I have lived here on this earth. The writer of Isaiah 40 said that our lives are as temporary as flowers. The winds of time pass over us and we wilt and are carried off like straw in a storm. That sense of time that's fleeting has not changed in all these 2,500 years. Today, just as they did so long ago, we look up into the sky, into a clear, crisp winter night sky with wonder and awe at its beauty and vastness. We don't need to be a philosopher or a theologian to wonder about the purpose of creation and our part in it. Even scientists question the meaning of life. Even modern day astronomers ask the age-old question, what for? Is there a purpose in life? Is there a purpose to any of this? Who or what is God? Was there a God before time began? Time, as we understand it now, began about 13.7 billion years ago with the Big Bang. Now scientists are puzzling over string theory and pondering the time before time. Somehow, the creator of all of this must have been outside of time, outside of space, outside of everything. What started it? What touched off the Big Bang? What lit the fuse? When I was in high school chemistry, I was taught to draw atoms with a central nucleus surrounded by dots on rings to represent the electrons in their orbits. Electrons around a nucleus looked a lot like the planets circling the sun. Eventually, I learned that electrons are probably more like bits of energy zipping up and down from one orbit or energy level to another. The chemistry drawings and models essentially freeze frame that action. Quantum physics says that everything everywhere is made out of energy, and that even the electrons themselves are not solid particles spinning in orbit around a nucleus, despite what the models hanging in our chemistry classrooms would imply. Quantum physics tells us that electrons are waves of energy, which only seem to be particles when we look at them. Observing the process changes the energy. Sometimes an electron is a wave instead, and only when someone looks at it does it seem to be a particle. We can never really know or experience anything just by watching it. The observer effect makes common sense to us when we think about someone watching us do math. Most of us just can't do math with someone looking over our shoulders. And apparently I'm not nearly as good a driver when my husband is in the car. Imagine with me for a minute that there was indeed a time before time, a time before the Big Bang, when there was nothing but the creative source of all, and when no one or nothing existed to be watching. In that time before anything, the energy that was the source of all was unobserved, indescribable, and inexperienceable. If we ponder this from the perspective of quantum physics, we could deduce that the source of all, without observers, was totally unknowable. Tokapa Turner, an award-winning Canadian author, in her book titled Belonging, wrote that in the beginning of the world there was longing. Cynthia Bourgeault, in her book The Holy Trinity and the Law of Three, also wrote about the longing, the ache in the heart of the source of all that motivated creation. Back in the 16th century, Isaac Luria studied Kabbalah, a form of Jewish mysticism. He taught that in the time before what we now call the Big Bang, the source of all being somehow withdrew and created an emptiness. Then, sending a ray of the light of being into that emptiness, the source of all shattered it into what we now know as our world and universe. I remember watching my mother make rolls. My cookbook tells me to make rolls by dividing the bread dough up into equal parts. And the pictures show how to use my rolling pin to roll the dough into a circle, which I could then easily cut into equal pieces with a knife to form perfect rolls. But my mother would take the dough in her hand and she'd squeeze her thumb and index finger together, and some dough would come up between, and she'd break that off and roll that into a ball and pop the ball into a pan. Her rolls were always different sizes, but we never minded. Mom's rolls were delicious. I think about creation that way. I like to think about creation that way, imagining Mother God squeezing off a part of her massive self to shape into a star system or a tree or into me. Each piece is different, yet each is a part of Source. When I think of creation that way, I can understand how everything, every animal, every person, each mineral and element is somehow made out of the one source of all, the one vast and living dough of the Creator, all coming from the same batch, carefully shaped and placed into the pan of the universe to grow and bake. Quantum physics tells us that everything is one substance. Everything is made of energy from one energy source. The individuation that we see all around us is an illusion in the same way that the water in a bay is no different from the water in the rest of the ocean. The Bay of Fundy seems to be separate and distinct from the Atlantic, but it is part of the whole. Similarly, one drop of water does not seem like much, but the many drops of water in the ocean hold immense power. Assuming quantum physics is correct, that each of us and everything around us is made of the one and the same stuff, I can imagine myself as part of the ocean of life, a droplet in full connection with all the other droplets. If I allow myself to melt into that ocean of being, would I be able to feel and know the whole of it somehow? Isn't that the level of intimacy we all desire in some way, where we truly know one another and all that is? And maybe is that the what for of the universe, the calling for the deep intimacy with each other and with Creator? Isaiah tells us to look to the sky, to look at the stars, and to wonder how they came to be. We look up and see the Big Dipper and Orion and maybe Cassiopeia. I tell myself that I should work harder at remembering the names of the stars and constellations. Isaiah may have had the same thought. Who named them, he asked. Who leads them across the sky? Recently, I saw something on Facebook. Someone somewhere commented that the world we know might be like some alien child's grade 5 science project tucked into the back of a cupboard and forgotten. That was the feeling of the people of Israel. That's how they felt when this chapter in Isaiah was written. They were sure that God was not paying attention at all to them and didn't even care when things weren't going well. And not going well is an understatement. At the time that this passage was written, they were in exile in Babylon. They were not able to go to the temple for their sacred traditions, and there was no sign of rescue. God must not care. They couldn't understand it. Augustine wrote that if you can understand it, it's not God. I'd rather say that if you can understand it, then it's not all of God. God is bigger than any description or metaphor that we might use. Even the word creator is a metaphor and does not hold all of whatever the sacred is. So, look at the stars, Isaiah wrote. Look at the sky. Now we know that what they could see in the vastness of their dark nights was only a fraction of the stars in the universe. Isaiah was saying that even though they were no more than insects in comparison, the source of all being had not put them on a shelf in the back of a cupboard forgotten. The creator of this vast universe doesn't get tired. Even young people get tired, Isaiah said. They stumble and fall, but those who trust in the Lord will find new strength. They will be strong like eagles, soaring upward on wings. They'll walk and run without getting tired. There may be days when we feel as if we have been exiled to some remote backwater in the universe. We may have tremendous knowledge about the stars and space and how physics works, but there are times when we feel just as much in a place of desperation as the Israelites did. In those times of desperation, we may find ourselves asking, what for? That question may be our way of reaching out into the intimacy of the universe, the enchanted universe, where Creator longed to be seen just as much as we long to be known and loved. So look up, look at the sky, feel the presence of Creator with you always.